Welcome to the Golden Crane Award-winning Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Riley Jarvis is the founder and CEO of The Sleep Consultant, an organization that helps CEOs, entrepreneurs, and high performers transform their sleep to significantly boost their productivity and energy levels. Riley started through his own health journey many years ago and discovered that sleep was the missing link that brought everything together. Since then, he's been helping others unlock their, quote, biology code, end quote, and achieve, quote, sleep nirvana by getting to the root cause of the issue rather than putting a Band-Aid on symptoms. Riley, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're going to be talking about one of the most important things to human beings, sleep. So what does it mean to get a good night's sleep?
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. It's an honor to be on your show. So sleep is so important, and sleep is one of those things that we tend to neglect. One, because we kind of put sleep on this back burner, and we just think it's this thing where we just close our eyes and then we open our eyes and we just get on with it. And we tend to like to push it under the rug because we're unconscious, and especially with a lot of the high performers I work with, but quite frankly, at anybody, what they're trying to do is, less sleep is sometimes a badge of honor. And sometimes when we sleep less, we think we can get more done. But what I've been able to do with a lot of people is when we can improve their sleep, or at least the quality of their sleep, they can just get so much more done. It'll improve your family relationships with your spouse, your children, the output at your work. I've been able to make people go from 8-hour workdays down to 6-hour workdays. They have 2 free hours during the day. And then what you can do with that time, your free time for leisure for yourself, your family, your loved ones, your other friends and stuff. It's just amazing when you can improve quality of life. And as a consequence of that, you become less stressed, you improve sleep, and it's just this upward spiral that goes. So we know a lot about diet and we know a lot about exercise, but sleep is that one I call them the 3 amigos: sleep, diet, and exercise. And sleep's kind of that one that goes untouched. And it's nice now because more people are becoming aware of it. But I've just seen it time and time again when we just make some tweaks on people's sleep, and we are all sleeping anyway. So if we just make the certain right personalized dial changes, then things can drastically improve.
How do you know when we get a good night's sleep? I mean, I feel rested, ready to take on the day, but it may be really difficult to fall asleep. So What does that really look like for someone? How can they identify, wow, I really had engaged in rapid eye movement and things of that nature?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting question because most of the time, the answer is using a sleep tracker, and you can really identify and see, for example, like an Oura Ring or your Apple Watch or a Fitbit. And some of these other ones, my favorite is personally Oura Ring because that's all they specialize in. They just seem to have the most accurate data and everything. But a lot of the time, clients that I work with, they don't wear any of these trackers. And it's funny enough, their spouse usually who'll tell them, you snore a lot at nighttime, you move around your dreams and everything. So it's usually at that point, their spouse will tell them something. And sometimes it's chronic. Something like sleep apnea might go undiagnosed for a long period of time, but most people, it's more along the functional ranges where they're just not getting those full deep sleep and REM sleep cycles. And it's really hard to identify that if somebody's watching you. But if you can actually have a sleep tracker that measures your heart rate, it measures your body temperature, your oxygen capacity, and all these things, and it brings it into one algorithm. And then from there, it can tell you, okay, what was your actual quality of sleep? And it's not as accurate when all the wires are connected to you, but what you're looking for is trends. It's like, how did your sleep improve when we changed this thing, when we didn't eat so late into the night, when we didn't maybe exercise so late into the night, when our bedroom was more black? And we can use these numbers to kind of gauge and just see if what we're doing is moving in the right direction.
What kinds of sleep trends have you noticed, especially since there's this overarching stress from the pandemic, and not to mention today, some very historically disturbing news, in addition to all of the mass shootings and so forth?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, stress, everybody's body reacts differently to stress, and it'll manifest in different ways, and that's all a lot of genetic factors that can go on for some people. A really good analogy that's simple to follow that I like to tell people is your genetics loads the gun, but it's the environment where we're exposed to stress, diet, exercise, all these other things that actually pulls the trigger. So you can be exposed to, people think they have a bad roll of the dice with their genetic destiny, but as long as you don't express those genes because you have the right environment in place by keeping that stress low, then you can live a very, fruitful life. But what I've seen stress do with a lot of people is stress, stress is really interesting, but it goes a lot deeper because I really like to look at, for example, our hormones. There's cortisol, there's adrenaline, and all these other things that are happening inside of our body. And it's amazing when our body is stressed, what's actually happening. And you can see, like, if you could imagine your body is just like all these people working together as this one machine to try and make your body operate, they would just be running on overtime, and they would be so stressed out. When you're stressed out, all these body systems are trying to compensate for one another. And then you can think of like these different buckets. They should be overflowing, but sometimes if they're depleted, then it's just, it's almost like a Jenga puzzle. When you pull so many pieces out, eventually the whole thing will start to come down. So it's a little bit like that with a lot of people. And what stress will do to them is it will affect their sleep. So their mind will be racing before they go to sleep, and they won't be able to fall asleep unless they have some sleep aid. You can do natural or something more synthetic, which has side effects itself, but also too, waking up a lot in the middle of the night. And even if we just wake up to go in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, we come back and then we can't get back to sleep because we're thinking what we have to do the next day. And then it becomes this game of thinking of the thinking of the thinking. And, it just will not stop. So just as a side note, if that ever happens to you, get up, do something, listen to an audiobook, whatever you can do to get your attention away from that's shown by the science that you can really help fall asleep. But it's everything. So then when you can't sleep well, your body is more stressed, and it's not just stress in your mind, but also in your body too. What actually happens is your hormonal system starts to become tanked. Your adrenal glands are really pumping all this stuff on overtime. And after a while, we can see it a lot in a lot of the lab results. It's almost like whipping a tired horse. You can whip the tired horse as much as you want. And the analogy there is you can start drinking coffee, pumping your system with all this different synthetic stimulation, or just, when you're just naturally in overdrive. And eventually your body just won't produce the amount that it once did. And what that manifests to is you just taking coffees and then you don't do anything anymore. You're just always low on energy no matter what you try. You go to the doctors, medication upon medication, and that's where you really have to start to build yourself up. So that's where it's very interesting. So that's why I like to test and not guess. Guessing is very good, and ultimately how you feel is the best indicator. But it's just interesting when you see all these pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And now that cannabis is legal in various states, are you seeing people use that more as a sleep aid? And what do you see as the impact, positive, negative, or in between of utilizing that as a sleep aid?
Yeah, for sure. Marijuana can be very good for some people. A lot of the science is showing that it doesn't actually help you with sleep. Specifically, I think, it's almost like alcohol. It gets a good rap because it helps us fall asleep. It helps us calm down. But the actual quality of our sleep, especially the REM sleep that our brain needs to fully recharge, that is actually what gets decreased, and that quality will go down. So sometimes you'll notice, and there is, some percent of the population that can take, ingest weed or smoke weed, and they're totally fine. What is better is CBD oil. And I'll talk about that in a second, but that'll actually decrease the quality on average, but it's something that people have to play around with. And ultimately it's self-experimentation. Wear a tracker, get an Oura ring or whatever you have, try it for 2 weeks, let that course run, and then kind of look at that data and see how am I actually responding to it? Because some people it's great, some people not so great. On average, I see it doesn't help as many people as it should, maybe in the short term, but after, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you start to get diminishing returns. And that's where, they usually leave it, but then you have a withdrawal effect. But CBD oil is really good when you don't have the active THC inside of it. That can really help relax people. There's a lot of benefits of that with inflammation and other things as well. So, CBD can be really great with people. What I really like to do is focusing, some of these things can be Band-Aids, but really want to get to the root cause of what is actually going on. Because when you can get to the root cause, then the symptoms tend to not manifest in the first place, and you don't need all these aids. So that's where I like to get to, but relief care and these different things are a great thing to do along the way.
And I ask because I work with individuals with substance use disorders and PTSD and so forth. And classic symptom of PTSD is having nightmares. And so how do you see a sleep expert working in complementary to a mental health professional with something of that nature?
Yeah, with sleep, it's really interesting. They've done so many surveys with tens of thousands of people, and the biggest reason people can't sleep, I think it was like 61%, was overthinking, and their mind just would not shut down. And especially people with mental health, it's a very interesting thing. And the question is it a chicken or egg thing? Did the sleep come first? Did the mental disorder come first? What I've seen is they kind of go side by side. One doesn't help the other out. But when you're working with a mental health professional, I always like to be kind of that coach along with them. It's always between them and their doctor what they decide. But I'm really here as their aide to guide them through with that. And whatever they decide to do with their doctor is their choice. But sometimes if you can combine and more natural solutions to, what they're doing with prescription medication, that's great. Some of my clients prefer to come off the medication entirely. And again, they slowly taper off with their doctor, and then they could go to more natural solutions. And I've seen great results from that too. Just depends on where people are with that. But for sure, mental health and how we feel, it's very, very important. That's why things like meditation. And another big thing too is, this one's actually kind of interesting, is a lot of the time when we wake up in the middle of the night is because even if we don't have nightmares, or maybe we do, that's kind of on the extreme end, it's because our brain is processing so much stuff in the unconscious mind. And even if it doesn't make too much sense to us, it's working just on overtime. It's actually more awake while we sleep than when we are, conscious in the daytime, which is really interesting. It's doing so much that we cannot begin to imagine. And so a big reason why we wake up sometimes is it's just so much that it's processing. It's almost like your computer just has all these viruses and processes that are happening and taking up the RAM, versus an hour, if we can go before we go to bed, if we can just do a brain dump on a journal and write everything down, that will be a blank slate for our brain. And it's amazing with clients when I start implementing that. It's just, less to process, less waking up in the middle of the night, and things just get a lot better. And it's not overnight. It might take you a couple of weeks, but I usually say give it a month.
Yeah, it's interesting to do that exercise. I actually use it myself, and all the jumble, it doesn't matter how jumbled it seems, like that is actually in your mind. And when you put it down on your paper, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is a physical manifestation of what is going on back there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible.
Another thing I was wondering is about circadian rhythms. I tend to label myself as a night owl, and other people are early risers. So how does that really play out in terms of sleep schedules? And especially since some jobs require you to be on the clock at 8 a.m.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one too, because so many people work morning jobs, but they're actually night owls. 70% of the population is actually a night owl, and 30% is a morning person. But 100% of all jobs pretty much are oriented for the morning, right? And so that's why people are going for coffee and all these different things.
Right.
And the studies show, like, if you can, delay somebody's workday by 1 or 2 hours, their productivity just improves through the roof. Same with kids and stuff in school, attention issues and all these other things. So I think that's massive to take into consideration. And that's why, again, taking not a cookie cutter approach, but one that's targeted, tailored to the person's biology is really good to do. Now, different ways to figure out, people probably have a good sense of what they actually are. Like when you were younger, did you go to bed late at night, or are you more of a morning person? But what I like to do is genetic testing. You can send a kit to somebody's house, they take a saliva sample, and that will tell you for sure based on your genetics what you are, and you can customize somebody's schedule to that. And it's amazing sometimes because we become so used to our old version of normal. Maybe we've been going to bed late for 20 something years and we think that's what we are. But when we see the genetic test, it's actually, oh, they're a morning person. And then we slowly switch their schedule around to that. We let their body adapt. And then within a few weeks, it's like they had way more energy than they ever thought was, because you have a match between your internal environment and the external environment too. So that's where things get interesting. But, in the meantime, you can always do quizzes. One is you can go to www.thepowerofwhenquiz.com. It takes about 5 minutes. There's 4 sleep animal signs. So there's like dolphin, bear, tiger, and or wolf and lion. And I'll give you a customized schedule based on that. So that's an easy way to figure out. But I think genetics is the best way to go with the testing.
And can you get that at your primary care provider, or?
It's an interesting, because there's so the one people know the most about is 23andMe, and I think 23andMe is very good. I like to use one called Circle's DNA. Now they are a lot more expensive. I like quality over the marketing. 23andMe is good. You can see your answer sheet, but apparently they only use 1% of your DNA, versus Circle's DNA will use your entire sequence of DNA. So, but the difference in price, 23andMe, maybe 150, $200. Circle's DNA is, close to $800. But if anybody's interested, I can get pretty good discounts. So just let me know and I can maybe help someone out.
That'd be awesome. Well, you're the expert. So what are the top 3 sleep advice that you would give someone? I know you're not consulting right now with a specific person in front of you and you don't want to do cookie cutter, but just simple things that they can implement.
Yeah, for sure. I really like to make it super simple for people and make it about morning routine, evening routine, and then everywhere in between. And so starting with the morning routine, actually, we'll start with the evening routine because that's one people are familiar with. So before we go to bed, we want to minimize blue light as much as possible. I won't talk too much about why, but it reduces our melatonin, which is our master sleep hormone. And so if we can do that a few ways, we can invest in blue light blocking glasses. One of my favorite brands is called True Dark, and you can just Google that. One's called the True Dark Twilight Classics. But you can just go onto Amazon and find some of those. And what you want to do is just pop those on 1 or 2 hours before bed. And that just kind of buys you sort of an insurance policy. So, blue light's not coming as much into your eyes. One recent study just showed 1 hour blue light exposure before bed reduced melatonin levels by 90%, which is pretty big. So you can see how that can directly impact your REM sleep and everything else like that. So blue light's a big one. Also, when we're going to sleep, we want to reduce the light exposure as much as possible coming in. So this includes, for example, blackout curtains, even our environment before we go to sleep. Like, are we looking at the TV? Is our room very bright, or are the lights dimmed, or at least are the lights off? Or in our applications, do we have the red light filter that we can apply to that at the same time? That's a big, interesting difference. And one cool thing with that is once you start doing these things, you'll start noticing yourself getting tired about 1 or 2 hours earlier. And that's an indication when your body is actually tired. It's just, we kind of go into the second wind effect because this blue light stimulates us and actually keeps us awake longer than we naturally should be. So that's one big thing as well. Also, while we're sleeping, a lot of people don't realize, but we have these light receptors around our eyes. So even if our eyes are closed, we can still detect on a subtle level lights coming in. So that's why it's important. We want our room to be as pitch black as possible. So blackout curtains, any TV boxes, television, stuff like that. We want to reduce that light as much as possible. Some of my clients, they can put all their house on a timer. So, when 10 p.m. hits, everything goes down. And that's just an easy way to do it once you have that system in place. And that's kind of going to the extreme. But some people will cover it with tape or they'll turn it off. And that can be a big difference as well for a lot of people. Also in the evening routine, you want to have your bedroom temperature to be cool. So between, Celsius, about 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 to 18 Celsius. That's a big one. And really just calming your mind down. Audiobooks are a great example. Another app on your phone is called brain.fm. It can put your brain into a really sleepy state. It's kind of like binaural beats. Another device you can use is called Sensate. I think they're called Sensate.fm. You can check them out. That really helps with your heart rate variability, an active device to help you get in there. So some of these tools you can really use, even a hot shower too. If we have a hot shower, hot bath before bed, what will happen is our body temperature will go from hot and it will rebound to the cool temperature, which will actually help us sleep better. There's that. We can wear warm socks. We can elevate our bed mattress a couple inches where the head is, and that will help with our brain's lymphatic systems. That kind of help detox our brain. For REM sleep, one thing while we do sleep is the first half of sleep is deep sleep. That's restoring like our physical body. Second half of sleep is REM sleep. So if we wake up in the middle of the night, we're not going to get that full REM sleep that we need for, memory, for emotional intelligence, just feeling like we're really on point, which can translate to more coffee and more stress. So that's a long-winded evening routine. For the morning routine, a lot of people think it's about the evening routine and sleep, but equally it's about the morning because we really want to tell our brain, when is it time to wake up and when is it time to go to bed? And it goes back to your question about the circadian rhythm question. And so if we can get the synchronization on point, it knows when to wake up, be alert, and then when is it time to go to bed, we can really get this in place and we'll have more resilience throughout the day. And so what that looks like is when we first wake up, we want to expose our eyes to sunlight for about 15, 20 minutes as soon as possible. And so, it depends on where you live. I'm up here in Canada, so in the winter months, it's a little difficult, but you can buy, these Lumi lights with 10,000 lux, where it's just super bright. Keep that in your eyes for about 15 to 30 minutes. And then same thing with the sun, don't look directly at the sun, but kind of look up to it as much as you can. And don't wear sunglasses when you go for your morning walk, because a lot of people do that. But what that's doing is that natural light's coming into your eyes, it's activating your master clock, and it's sending all these different signals to your organs and different processes in your body. It's time to wake up. It's time to get the day started. And if we don't have that, that's why sometimes we don't feel sleepy at night. So that's the biggest one. Also, when we first wake up, drink 1 liter of water, because we lose 1 liter of water from our breath alone while we sleep. And also, if we go for our first cup of coffee, we want to have that coffee 90 minutes after we wake up. I won't go too much into why, but it has to do with our cortisol. Cortisol is at its highest when we first wake up, and it starts to take a dip within 90 minutes. So if we can catch that right away while still being hydrated, then we will be good to go. But most people will go right for coffee when they wake up, when they're already dehydrated. And it's a diuretic, which will actually dehydrate us more and decrease mental performance. So those are just some little cool tricks there. And then throughout the day, expose your eyes to sunlight as much as you can. And then by the time the evening comes, reduce. Some other ones I didn't mention, for example, is don't have intense exercise. Don't have too much of a heavy meal about 2 or 3 hours before bed. If you go to bed about 10 p.m., eat, maybe 5, 6 p.m. latest. And that can really help. A lot of the time we wake up sometimes because we have a blood sugar spike or a cortisol spike. And to minimize that, we can have a light meal, we can have a protein shake or different good sources of fat before bed, for example, cashew butter, almond butter. So those are some tips people can use.
And also the exercise, because a lot of people, they get off of work, they obviously want to eat dinner and have to time their exercise routine. What would you say is the best time to do that so it doesn't disrupt like the evening routine?
For sure. A really good time to exercise is between 3 and 5 p.m. And that works out pretty well because by the time dinner comes around, then it's a good post-workout meal. And then when you have, a good dinner that includes, for example, like healthy carbohydrates such as sweet potato, white rice, a lot of these paleo whole food diets, that will increase melatonin, which is a precursor to, serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. What that means is it just helps us relax, helps us feel good, and that'll help us feel sleepy going on. So that's a really good way to do it, especially for the night owls who seem to stay awake longer.
Definitely. Well, what led you to become interested in sleep?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. I started about 10 years ago. I was in finance, and that's what I went to school for. And it was kind of investment banking, private equity, just really intense hours. It's kind of like a dog eat dog world, Wolf of Wall Street type of thing. And I was just, my performance started to just really tank, and I just was not feeling good. I started to lose weight. My mental performance wasn't there, and I was in my early 20s at the time, and I did not know what was going on because someone my age should have no issues with their health. And so saw the family doctor, no answers, saw a bunch of specialists. Anyway, turns out I had Crohn's disease, which is inflammation of your bowels. And, there's definitely with it. Mine got pretty bad. Some people, can be a lot worse, and it can be terminal for some people. But what it did to me was made me lose weight. And a lot of the side effects from the medication they were giving me were actually making me feel worse. So I actually fell into this deep depression, and I was kind of bedridden, and I didn't know what to do, fell into a ton of debt, and lost my job. And all these other things. So I basically had to take health into my own hands. And so it was sort of day by day researching these things online, like how does our body actually work, and going from like a first principles approach. And then, it was from that point, I tried different things each month. So 1 month it would be diet, one would be exercise, one would be sleep. And when I got to that month of sleep, things just suddenly started getting better so quick. And I was doing blood tests, and it was showing improvements in those markers and other things. The more I tried it, the more things got better. And I thought, I think I'm onto something. So then that just translated to me really just fixing my health. The last 5 years, it's been a 100% complete remission. That just translated to my personal story, helping other people, so that, it was just friends of friends, and sleep was kind of this cool niche topic. Word spread pretty quickly. And then after that, I thought, I think I could help people around the world. And then, over the last few years, that's what I've been doing. But now what I do is I send lab testing kits to people's houses, and we look at about 800 biomarkers and see like, where's the weak links, where's the holes, and how can we get to the root cause and source of all this stuff. And that's where you take a sniper-like approach, so you can get better pretty quickly. So anyway, that's kind of how I started with all of it. Is kind of my own personal story, and then going through education and kind of doing that whole thing again. So looking back, I mean, who knows, maybe it was a blessing in disguise.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of personal experiences fuel our passion for helping other people once we help ourselves. And that's a very important message that you're sending, though, is that
For sure.
you have to work on your own health as well. And in tandem, even if you're in remission, there's still those tweaks, because people go on vacation and they want to eat all sorts of things, which is fine. But especially as you're trying to get back into your work and stress and all that, it definitely can become undone pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It can. And, it just depends. Everybody falls into a different place. Some people can get away with more things than other people. There's certain people, there's a gene that people have, and only, I think it's less than 1% of the population has it, where they only need 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And we all know somebody who only needs that amount of sleep, and they're functional and they're usually high functioning as well. And we think, how can we do it? And, that's just a genetic anomaly. But all of us on average need about 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And it just depends. All of us have a different stress bucket. How much can our stress bucket handle? And it depends on external stressors and also internal stressors too. So really just be mindful of that and don't compare yourself to anybody else.
I was going to say it's either the genetic marker or you might be experiencing mania, because a lot of people get addicted to that feeling as well, because they feel like they're being super productive during that time. So that's a whole nother discussion, but I think that is a small portion of the population. And so really taking your thoughts and advice on being able to get this holistic picture. So it's amazing work. And you reminded me that you're in Canada because I heard the about. There's a slight difference. And, I was just thinking, it's so funny because I was like, oh, I should go to Vancouver just to take a visit, but not in the winter. So tell us more about where our listeners can learn more about you and potentially work with you.
Yeah, very easy. They can go to www.thesleepconsultant.com. And inside of there's a bunch of blogs. They can subscribe to a newsletter. There's a bunch of free trainings. They can also do a free one-on-one 15-minute sleep consultation assessment directly with me. And we can kind of go through their bedroom routine. Sometimes we'll kind of do like a FaceTime and we'll look at their bedroom environment, just some tweaks that can be made. I'm just really trying to help people as much as I can. And then, I do have paid services too. So I have a video program. And if they want to do the genetic testing, really go, deep with that, that's always an option as well. But yeah, everything's there. My email as well as Riley, Riley, at thesleepconsultant.com.
That's amazing. And I mean, what is the most interesting bedroom setup that you've seen that you're like, oh no, like do not do this?
I had somebody who, I get quite a few clients from New York, they're just right downtown, right in the city where there's just so much light coming in and noise and everything. And I had one guy where it was he had no drapes. It was just one window. So his bedroom was literally light, like it would not shut off. And it was no wonder he couldn't sleep that well until he actually relocated. So that was a pretty crazy one. But I've had some, people with, you have the obvious crazy neighbors, but, kids and stuff like that can be a big thing as well. But I met other people who are really into technology who have flashing lights in their bedroom when they sleep. It helps them with everything, like to mimic the stars and things like that. I mean, it looks really cool. It depends with some people. Like if you some people like to sleep with their TV on, and that comforts them, and that's great too. It just depends. But that's why it's always, custom tailored, meeting them where they're at, and then just baby stepping in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, Riley, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Canada. This is amazing partnership because we get to meet people all around the world just by discovering each other's work. And you're so knowledgeable about this.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.